Hello and welcome to the Brit Lit Book Club. Today we have a very special episode with author Essie Fox, who has written her latest novel titled Catherine, a retelling of Wuthering Heights. Thank you for doing this. This is so fun. It's fun to meet you, and I'm excited about your new project. And I was just looking at some of your other books too, and I'll have
Oh,
to dip into some of those.
there's quite a few now. I've been writing for about, my first novel was published in 2011, so 15
Wow.
years. Mm.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, I'll just read your little bio if that's okay.
Yep.
And then we'll kind of just get into questions and if there's anything else that you want to add as well. Okay. Essie Fox was born and raised, and you might have to help me with the pronunciation of Herefordshire. Did I
Herefordshire.
say it right?
Yeah, yeah,
Herefordshire? Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Was born and raised in Herefordshire. And where is that exactly, Essie?
It's on the borders of Wales, so it's very rural, very countrified, and
Oh,
it's an
amazing.
area that's very hilly and wooded, and actually lots of black and white villages. So the new film of Hamnet, which has just been made,
Oh,
it
yes.
was actually filmed in a Herefordshire village. So those black and white houses, they do exist. There's what they call the Herefordshire Trail that you can go on, and these villages are all about 4 miles apart. And they all look like that, black and white houses, medieval,
Oh,
Elizabethan, fantastic.
that's amazing. I love that. I just watched Hamnet a couple weeks ago and actually just did a podcast about it. My friend and I saw it and just did a little chit chat about it
Yeah,
afterwards. So it was,
yes.
yeah, it was a beautiful film. Have you seen it yet?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm not sure I'm
Okay.
emotionally ready to see it. I keep hearing it's
Yeah.
a real tearjerker, which
Yeah.
obviously it would be. I've read the book. I will see it, but I've been terribly busy at the moment.
I
And
am sure. Launching a book, I'm sure that's
yeah,
a lot of work.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but bring your tissues and be
Right,
ready to cry.
right. Okay. I do like a good
All
tearjerker.
right. Yes. Every once in a while. Okay, so after studying English literature at Sheffield University, she moved to London and began a career in publishing. From there, becoming self-employed in commercial art design, which is interesting shift, right? Always an avid reader, she now writes historical novels. Her debut, and you might have to pronounce this one for me as well,
Somnambulist, which means sleep,
Somnambulist.
which means
What
sleepwalk.
does, oh, interesting. Okay, I did
Mm,
not know that.
yeah.
Was shortlisted for the National Book Awards and featured on Channel 4's TV Book Club. Elijah's Mermaid, The Goddess and the Thief, and The Last Days of Leda Gray were all selected by the Times as historical books of the month. Is that a series, Essie,
No, we
or are they
have
all separate?
they're all separate, they're all completely independent, but the first three are all Victorian era novels.
Oh,
And the
nice.
fourth one, The Last Days of Lady Grey, is based on a an Edwardian early silent film actress in Brighton in the UK, where they used to make lots of the very earliest films, which weren't like the slapstick comedies that came later with Charlie Chaplin and that sort of thing in
Hmm.
the States. These were earlier than that. They were really early, and they tended to be very dark, sort of fairy tale, very short films, about 5 minutes each, because it took so long to make them then.
Yeah.
And some of these are films I used to see, and they were just amazing. There's a French director called Georges Méliès, and he does a lot of these films. Um, so that was really interesting for me to look into and research, but I wanted to frame it in a way that it was accessible. So I had a journalist in the present day, or actually the 1970s, but that was as close as I could get it for my actress to still be alive. And he tracks her down when she's in her 80s and interviews her. And she then tells him the story of her life as a silent film actress. And it's very ghostly, it's very eerie. And actually, it's one of my favorite books. It's so spooky.
Love it. My daughter just graduated film school in Canada, and so she's
Oh,
very into silent films and film
yeah.
history. So I'm going to recommend that book to her. She will definitely love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right up her alley. And yeah, when you said it took a long time to make films, it just, watching her, 5 minutes of film, will take months. So
Yes, yes.
not much has changed in that department, I
No,
guess.
no, definitely not. No, it's definitely an art form, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting your bio, but I'll get back to that. The Fascination was an instant Sunday Times top 10 bestseller. Dangerous, a Regency crime thriller, which sounds so fun, featuring Lord Byron, has been selected as a Times Book of the Month. Catherine, a retelling of Wuthering Heights, is Essie's latest novel. It reimagines Emily Bronte's Gothic landscape and plot through the eyes of Cathy's ghost. Essie has appeared at many literary events and has lectured at the V&A, the Westminster Library, and the National Gallery in London. She also hosts a podcast, Talking the Gothic, which I listened to a few episodes this week, and that was fun. So thank you and welcome, Essie. Glad that you're here in the
Thank
Brit Lit Book
you.
Club podcast.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. It's really nice to meet you.
Yes, you as well. Do you want to be ready to just dive into questions and
Absolutely.
talk about these?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
let me know if there's anything that you want to skip. I can edit anything out. So, okay, we'll just start at the beginning. Let's just chat about your newest book. Do you want to just give us a quick summary, just
Yes.
about what the book is about?
I'll read you what's actually printed in the inside cover flap of the book, which this is the
Oh,
first edition of a special edition.
it's
And
so pretty. I don't do a video, but that is beautiful. And if you're listening, you should go look at a picture online because it's pretty.
so it says, with a nature as wild as the moors, she loves to roam. Catherine Earnshaw grows up alongside Heathcliff, a foundling her father rescued from the streets of Liverpool. Their fierce, untamed bond deepens as they grow until Mr. Earnshaw's death leaves Hindley, Catherine's brutal older brother, in control and Heathcliff reduced to servitude. Desperate to protect him, Catherine turns to Edgar Linton, the handsome heir to Thrushcross Grange. She believes his wealth might free Heathcliff from cruelty, but her choice is fatally misunderstood, and their lives spiral into a storm of passion, jealousy, and revenge. Now, 18 years later, Catherine rises from her grave to tell her story and to seek redemption.
Love it. It does sound very spooky, very ghostly.
Yes, it is. It's all told from the point of view of Catherine's ghost, which actually gave me lots of opportunity to be able to see things in the novel that might not have been seen before. So at some point, she has almost an omnipresent view of what's going on, which gives me lots of scope to reveal lots of extra things that might not have, been told in the wonderful Wuthering Heights.
I'm excited. I forgot to ask, when does it release in the US?
In the US, I believe it comes out in April. I did ask my publisher to confirm the date, and I'm sure she will do that with you. She hasn't as yet.
Okay.
I think it's mid-April, and it
Okay.
should be available through Barnes& and Noble. I know they've put in a big order, so definitely through
Perfect.
Barnes& and Noble. And then I'm not sure about other independent bookshops, but I'm sure it will be.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I'll put the correct date at the end when I'll talk to
Thank
your
you so
publisher.
much. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry. I see that you put that description that in there. But thank you. It was much better having you read it. What drew you to tell, sorry, what drew you to retell Wuthering Heights from Catherine's perspective specifically? And when did you first realize her voice needed to be heard?
I have always been obsessed with this book. I think since I was very young, and I was about 7 or 8 years old, even younger maybe, and I watched a
Wow.
very old black and white film on television with my mother. So obviously that was watching a film. It was the Laurence Olivier Merle Oberon film made in the
Hmm.
1930s. And I think as a child of that age, I obviously wasn't aware of the deeper emotional implications of the film, but I really got a sense of the longing and the yearning and the grief. And it stayed with me, particularly the final scene when you have the snowy Yorkshire moors and you have the ghosts of Cathy and Heathcliff when they're both dead, walking away across the moors into the distance. And for some reason, that always, it just stayed with me. And there was a magic about that film, which is very strange to say, but I find that even when I read the novel for the first time when I was 17, I was so totally immersed in it, but very, very much engaged in perhaps trying to see myself in the role of Cathy in a way that lots of teenage girls perhaps do when they're reading novels. And I did sometimes think that perhaps, there was a little bit more that we could sympathize with her, because not to fault. I mean, obviously, I would never dream of faulting. I mean, I think Wuthering Heights is an absolutely amazing classic, and it is actually, I do agree, quite audacious of me to even attempt to do a retelling. But I felt that because Emily had told it from the point of view of Nelly Dean, mainly, who was the housekeeper and the maid in Wuthering Heights when Cathy and Heathcliff are growing up, but who also goes with Cathy when Cathy marries to live in her household as a lady's maid. So she basically, she is telling the story to a Mr. Lockwood, who is renting Thrushcross Grange, which is the house which, when Cathy was alive and married to Edgar Linton, she lived in. And since Cathy's death, and then 18 years after that, when her husband dies, the house is, by some very devious contrivances, left in the hands of Heathcliff, who lets it out. He doesn't want to live there, but he lets it out to a tenant, and that tenant is called Mr. Lockwood. And Nelly Dean, who is still in the house as a housekeeper, sits down with Mr. Lockwood, who's very unwell with a fever, and tells him the story of Wuthering Heights, because he's been on a visit himself to Wuthering Heights to meet his landlord, Heathcliff, and he's gone on a very snowy, cold winter's day and not been able to go back home again. So he has to stay the night. And when he stays the night, we have that iconic opening scene of the novel and most of the films, when he's in Cathy's box bed and he's reading through her old books with notes that she's written about how unfair life is for Heathcliff and how angry she is about it. And then she's scratched her name into the window ledge, but she's scratched Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, Catherine Linton. And that's when Mr. Lockwood eventually falls asleep and the trees are tapping on the window. And he isn't sure, but he believes he's seen a ghostly hand trying to break in, and it grabs his, and then he's rubbing it backwards and forwards against the broken glass, which is a absolutely horrific image if you think about it. And the
Hmm.
way to start a novel, it's incredible, and it's so dark, and it is very, very gothic. So Lockwood has witnessed this, gone back, become very ill with a fever. I sometimes think to myself, did he really see that ghost? Or, having read Cathy's notes in the margins of the books and having seen her name scratched, he was going down with a fever anyway at that point. And I wonder if it was a kind of fever dream whereby he imagined that. But then again, I think perhaps Emily wants us to believe that he really does see a ghost.
Right. Yeah, that whole opening scene in the book and movies is definitely a little bit terrifying. And yeah, you do have to wonder, is he
Yes.
seeing a ghost? Is he ill? Is he, what's happening? It's a wild ride.
Yeah.
Uh, just since this isn't really a question on our list, but since the movie, the 1930s movie, had such a big impact on you, how do you feel about the new movie coming
Mm.
out in a couple weeks, at least here? I'm not sure in the UK
Well,
when it
I've
releases.
seen them all. I've seen them all except this one, obviously, because it's not out yet.
Yeah,
And I find it really interesting the way each adaptation is so different, completely different. And I'm longing to see it. I cannot wait to see it. I I do reserve judgment on certain elements, but let's wait and see. I think the costumes are strange. I think the
very
whole thing
strange.
looks like a fever dream. Yes.
Hmm.
Um,
The tagline that they're
Casting,
using,
I
it was like the greatest love story ever told or something. I think that was like the tagline on one of the trailers I watched. I was like, is it though?
No, it's this is such a tricky one, isn't it? Because of course there is love between Cathy and Heathcliff. There is an intense bond there, which starts off when they're children, but when they grow up, it becomes obsession, perhaps obsession more than love, and that obsession leads to revenge and madness and tragedy. And I think it's possibly, I think my publishers have called it the greatest tragic love story ever told, or something like that.
I would agree with that.
Um,
I would agree with that
it's
tagline.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
but it's for me, it's a story of hatred, obsession, revenge, and the most dreadful tragedy. And it's all based on, errors, mistakes, things happening out of time that if they'd happened at a different time in a different place wouldn't have happened in the same way. And
Right.
I think Emily Brontë is so ingenious in the way that she's constructed her novel. But also, I think she's incredibly brave for her times in that she's related actually a very brutal, real world. She obviously understands human nature and the good and the bad in all of us. And it's a book which is very much about lightness and darkness, and the characterization and the landscape and the plot of the story, it all comes into this light and dark, which is why it's so important that Heathcliff is not necessarily black, because Nelly Dean does mention that he isn't what she would say conventionally black, um, but he's called a gypsy. He's called possibly a Lascar from the docks. Now, the Lascars were Indian sailors, possibly a runaway slave. So, possibly he is from the plantations. But whatever he is, I mean, at one point, Nelly Dean, she's trying to cheer him up, really, but she's saying to him, look in the mirror. If you only combed your hair, if you only had a wash, you could be the son of a prince of India. You could be, an Indian prince, and your mother might have been the Empress of China. So we know he is quite swarthy, he's exotic. He has amazing black eyes, which are mentioned many, many times. And obviously, he's quite unique and other in this North Yorkshire, very small, very enclosed rural environment. And he would have stood out as being different. And this darkness and otherness is a big thing about his whole story. So he's abused so much because of that in his youth. So obviously, when he grows up to be a man, he already has this resentment festering. He's actually been treated as a slave by Catherine's brother when her father dies, and her father is the only man who actually is there to defend him and care for him. And when he's gone, Heathcliff does enter a life of servitude, and it makes things very, very difficult. The hatred and the brutality. Hindley, Catherine's brother, is very cruel to Heathcliff.
It's so clear to me in the book that he is, of another race, that he's darker. They mention it several times, which, again, with the new movie coming out, I felt was such a missed opportunity that they did not cast someone of color. That
Do you
was,
know what
yeah, it
I
was just,
find even more astonishing? To me, actually, Jacob Elordi is the least of the problems about the casting. And I know these days, and I totally accept it, and I'm all for it, to have sort of open casting and
mhm.
um, but in a book where the whole story is based on color, lightness, darkness, we have
Yes.
Jacob, and we then have Cathy, who in the book is dark-haired and dark-eyed, and much is made of her dark eyes.
Not like Margot Robbie.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's 18 when she dies. So much of the action is taking place, much of the, what I would say, adult action, but they're not actually adults. They're, much of the action when Cathy is deciding that she's going to marry this rich neighbor is when she's about, 15, 16, and so is Heathcliff. So really, this is a passionate sort of teenage affair. And when you're a teenager and you're that age and you do fall desperately in love and your hormones are raging. And I think the world is so vivid to you then in such vibrant color. And you do feel that yes, I can do anything. So I think, Cathy's intention was to be very, very what she thought was clever, marry Edgar Linton, who was a very wealthy neighbor. And when she was married to him, she would have independent wealth. And she would then use that wealth for Heathcliff to be able to go away and have an education and to raise himself in the world, because there's so much about social status, and education is very much linked to social status in this
Hmm.
book. And Emily would have understood that very
Right.
much so. But going back to the casting, the whole thing about Edgar Linton, who Cathy marries, who is sort of in Heathcliff's eyes his arch enemy, as it were.
Hmm.
Edgar Linton is blonde. He has angelic golden curls. There is a lot made of this. On his deathbed, it's said when he's dying, he suddenly looked so much younger and his golden curls made him look like an angel. And this is so important, this balance of the good and the bad and the light and the darkness. And also Isabella Linton, who Heathcliff marries out of spite when he returns, and Cathy will not run away with him as he hopes. But then again, Cathy is pregnant by then. This is what I was saying about bad timing and awful things happening.
Yeah.
I honestly think had Cathy not been pregnant, because by
She
then
might have done it.
I think she would have done it. I think she would. I think because
Mhm.
Heathcliff was then very wealthy, though we never know in Emily's book where his wealth comes from. And Nelly Dean is very suspicious and thinks, he's really must be a bad type. He must be doing awful things for this to happen. And we never know
Right.
quite what those awful things are.
Mm-mm.
But Isabella, who he runs away with and elopes with and then makes her life absolute hell, is again golden haired. She is one of these angels in inverted commas from Thrushcross Grange, which is the heaven, the lightness and the heaven of civility and culture and upper class status. And Wuthering Heights is also a very grand house. I mean, Cathy does say, it's the second grandest house in the area, but it's far more Gothic. It's dark. It's windswept. And by the time Cathy decides to marry Edgar Linton, it's become an absolute hell for her because her brother's wife has died, and her brother is immersed in drink and drugs and bringing wanton women back and gambling, and it's just a horrible place for everybody to live.
Which I feel like Emily probably could have related to with her brother Branwell, and
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know,
Yes, yes. I feel that she really understood what hell living with someone immersed in that sort of great unhappiness. I mean, did try
Mhm.
to, I did try to look at Hindley a little bit more sympathetically, because one thing I felt when I was doing a very, very close reading of the book for, I don't know, the umpteenth time, but I really, really did a very close reading when I was writing my novel. I wanted to be as true as possible to the original while sort of weaving in and out of the spaces with my own story, as it were. And what I thought was so interesting was, like Bramwell, Hindley loses, well, Emily lost her mother as well, but Bramwell was of an age when he would have remembered his mother more. He loses his mother, and then they lose their two older sisters, and he's very close to Maria, one of the older sisters. And he's lost that. He does sort of take the three remaining sisters, our wonderful Brontes, Anne, Charlotte, and Emily, under his wing, and they have all sorts of adventures, literary adventures, when they're children, writing their tiny books and the Gondel and Angria books. But and he's so much a part of that, and I feel it's very sad because I think he's so inspirational to their creativity in their extreme youth. But by the time they're actually writing their novels, the disappointments of his life, I think he was the family's great hope that he would,
I think so too.
go away, either make a great success of himself through his art or by some other means. And he just one of those characters that always seemed to make a mess of it, never quite made it happen. And I feel that grief and all the grief and the loss in his childhood affected him very deeply. And then, of course, he resorted to alcohol and drugs, opiates, and died terribly sadly. And Emily witnessed all of that firsthand. Would have, it must have been very difficult. I don't know if you've been to the Parsonage Museum.
Yeah.
It's not that
Many
big.
times.
Yes, it's not that big
Yeah.
a house, is it? And I think
Mm-mm.
you think of those upstairs bedrooms and you would have heard everything. It would be very difficult if somebody was raving in the bedroom next door, having hallucinations, having terrible dreams, or just being rampantly drunk,
Mhm.
to actually not be, it must be night after night. It must have been just awful. So
Yeah.
she,
And I'm sure they were, helping him and nursing him and, as I just listened to this really interesting talk by another author, just talking about the domestic life of the Brontes and Jane Austen and comparing them, and just talking about how much of the caring, not even just like the laundry and cooking and that kind of thing, but just also the caring of the people in the family as
Mm.
the only women left in the family. You know, no older sisters, no mother. They would
Yeah.
have had to help nurse him through those things as well.
And the precariousness on top of the grief and the sorrow of seeing their beloved brother reduced to that, and the caring would have been intimate caring as well. It would have been,
Mhm.
very, very personal. Um, but to think that one of the reasons it was expected that Bramwell, of course, would leave home and make a good life for himself and a good living was that living in the parsonage, it was not their father's home. It was only their home as long as their father was the parson. And if anything happened that he stopped being the parson, they would be homeless. The whole family would be homeless. And so therefore there was a lot of weight on Bramwell's shoulders to actually be able to support them if anything like that did happen, or eventually when their father did die, to support his sisters. Of course, the terrible irony is that their father outlived them all. But I think seeing his decline and realizing that he was never going to make anything up for himself in the world is no doubt what also really, not the only thing, but it must have been influential in those three sisters deciding to write their novels, to try and make a living in a way that they knew they could, as well as, of course, going off and being governesses and that sort of thing, which they did. But
Really, your only options at that point.
were the
Could be a governess, or maybe you
yeah.
can write.
Yes, that's right. So maybe, it's interesting to think, and I hadn't really thought this before, but maybe if Bramwell had done it remarkably well and become a wealthy, independent man who could have supported them, would they have written their books? I
Right?
think they would,
Yeah.
because I think they're such
Yeah.
great writers. I think that talent, and of course, all the stories they wrote continually as children, I think that's always seething there
Yeah.
in their minds.
All of their writing has always felt to me like something that they had to get out of their system, particularly Wuthering Heights. I just feel
Mm.
like you have the
Mm.
story in your brain and you have to get it out.
It's an
It
astonishing
always, their
story.
stories always felt like that. Yeah.
Astonishing. And the brutality of it, as well, as I said before, it is truly astonishing. And of course, a lot of the critics at the time were very dismissive when it was first published, and saying it was a very strange book. It was, how it ever come to be published, because it was so immoral and so strange. And what makes me terribly sad is I go on not a lot of social media, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and seeing all of the interest in the new film, and seeing and lots of people are reading Wuthering Heights again before they see the film, and you see message after message after message. You can scroll down and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people talking about this book, and I think, gosh, Emily, I hope I don't know, I just hope because to think that she died, not so long after it was published, only seeing those reviews, um, and to think what has happened since, it's and also,
Hundreds of years later.
yeah, and what I think about Wuthering Heights myself, I mean, obviously I am an obsessive about it, but to me, I feel it's not like I'm reading a book with fictional characters. To me, it goes beyond that. Those characters are so real to me. It's as if, okay, in a different realm, but it's as if they exist, totally exist. I don't come to the end of that book and close it and think, okay, that's the end of a book, that's a fiction. It's like they live for me.
Yeah.
What has
I think
happened?
it's just one of those books that stick with you too. I mean,
Yes,
whether you love it or hate it, those
yes,
characters do stick with you. It's hard to forget. It's a
absolutely. They
story that's hard to
are.
forget.
And they're
Uh,
very difficult characters, I mean, they're not easy to
yes.
love. Definitely
No,
not.
definitely not. And I do feel like Wuthering Heights is one of those books that you either love or you hate when you're done. I find very few people in between, like, oh, that was like 3-star read for
Yeah.
me, like.
And I know quite a lot of people are very, like, they decide they're going to be in the camp of Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights, which is
Right.
very odd to me because I love them
It's
both.
Very odd. Yes.
Yeah. But funnily
All
enough,
right. I'll
when I first read
Oh, go
Jane
ahead.
Eyre, I would just quickly say, when I was a teenager, maybe because I'd read Wuthering Heights first, but when I read Jane Eyre for the first time, I thought, oh, I'm not sure I like this. I think I found Jane terribly prissy. And having read it since, I don't at all. So I think the way we read books when we're younger is quite different to how we read them when we're older. And Wuthering Heights is definitely one of those books. It changes every time you read it.
That was actually going to be one of my questions
Oh,
was, you
sorry.
read it at such a no, 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 I just thought about it later. You read it at such a young age and then, being older now,
Mm,
you don't look that old, but an adult.
mm.
I felt the same about Jane Eyre. Like I loved Jane Eyre when I was younger. And now I read it and I'm like, oh, there are so many red flags in this. I think I have teenage daughters now. I think, I'm just
Yes,
reading it from a different perspective
yes,
and
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
just get something different out of it every
Mm.
time you read Wuthering Heights as well. So,
And one thing I think about both Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre is my previous novel to this was called Dangerous, which is a play on Mad, Bad, and Dangerous. It was about Lord Byron. And it was very interesting to me when I was researching Emily's life and reading Wuthering Heights again and Jane Eyre, how Byronic Heathcliff is and Mr. Rochester. Incredibly Byronic.
definitely.
And Rochester having the daughter living in the house with him is so much like Byron with his illegitimate daughter Allegra who lived with him and the mother was not
Yes.
in view. And lots of things like that. And I just think, you know, as I said, they were brave. Their writing was brave. They went quite far within the stipulations of their age, of what they were,
Mhm.
what they could write, what one could write in that era.
Yeah. For being generally such sheltered individuals,
Mm.
too. I don't know. I just find that really incredible, especially after
Emily did
visiting the
Emily and
Bronte
Emily,
Parsonage.
yeah, but Emily and Charlotte travelled, didn't they? They went to Brussels. I know Emily came
Yeah.
quite soon because Emily wasn't happy away from home.
No.
But there's lots we don't know, you see. This is another thing I think. There are some scholars who get terribly incensed about certain aspects when people say certain things about Emily or about Charlotte, and they get very angry and say, no, 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 Emily would never do that. And I'm thinking, we don't really know. We know as much as we know. But
Yeah.
in the same way that, I'm talking to you now and I'm talking quite detailed, but there's a lot about myself I may not reveal and I wouldn't reveal. And you don't know, I might be a mass murderer. I mean, but
Let's hope not.
it's not actually.
No, it's true. I mean, we don't have much to go off of besides, their writings and, other, secondhand accounts. But yeah, I mean, same, I do a lot of work with Jane Austen, and so little is, so much is known about her, but so little at the same time.
Yes, yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yes. I don't know so much about Jane Austen, I must admit. That's another field I need to plow. I need to
yeah.
really read much.
Oh,
I mean, I did,
there's so much about
yeah.
so many.
I did
I love
I
that
did
you're,
read a lot of her books when I was at university. We did, I was doing English literature, but I think at that time reading so many novels in one short space of time, I loved them. The ones I think we did Persuasion, and Emma, but I need to go back. I need to go back, definitely.
once you've finished your Bronte era.
I don't know. That's the thing I was thinking the
It's
other day.
not gonna end
People
ever.
saying to me, "What's next? What are you going to write next?" And I said, "Well, I haven't been able to write a single thing since I finished this novel. And that's very strange for me. Usually give it 3 or 4 months and I'm raring to go on another book. But I finished
Right.
this time last year and I'm still immersed in this novel. And I'm
Mhm.
very much immersed in the Brontes. And
Yeah.
actually, I don't think, I mean, if I were to write another book, I mean, I think I could very easily be encouraged to write a book about Bramwell, but the problem is I don't know that there would be the wide enough readership for a publisher.
Yeah. The audience for it. Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
I would read it, definitely. My book clubs would read it, but
And
I see what you
I
mean.
mean, I think he's fascinating, absolutely and
Yeah.
tragic and such an interesting character. And you
Well, let me
know,
know if you write that book. I
I
would love to read it.
will, and just imagine how he must have felt when he
Hmm.
knew those books were being written, because I don't think they told him when they were writing.
Right.
And I presume have you seen the Sally Wainwright film? Um, at the end of it, uh, Bramwell is dying, but he comes into the room and the girls are sitting. He goes back in time, and the girls are sitting at a big table writing, and they've all got. It's very mystical. They've all got like
Oh,
crowns,
is it is
flames.
it Emily? Is that the film Emily?
No, no. This one is it Walk Invisible, Walking the
Oh, To Walk Invisible. Oh, yes, yes.
and the three girls are sat there writing at the table with their books anyway, and they've got flames of glory, like above
Yeah.
their head, and he hasn't. And earlier in the film, when they're all little children, they all have them, but
Yeah.
he loses his. And it's just so sad. I also think the pillar
Yeah.
painting is very sad, isn't it? Where he's painted the three girls and then
Yeah.
painted himself out. And people
Yeah.
say, oh, it's because he wanted, he didn't want the painting to be too cluttered. I don't think so. I
I
don't
don't
think
think so
so.
either. I think that's definitely a reflection of how he was feeling about himself.
Yeah.
Could have benefited from a lot of therapy, I think.
Yeah.
Poor Branwell.
Poor Bramwell.
I'll try to put some of these pictures on my website as well so people can know what we're
Mm,
talking about if they haven't
that
seen
would be
this picture
great. That
before.
would be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I'll put some links as well to your books. Okay, sorry, we have not gotten very far in the questions. I apologize. It's just so fascinating talking with you.
My fault. Sorry. I'll try and be
Uh,
more concise. I do go off.
no, no, no. It's great. No, it's great. I love it. Some of this we've already covered, so we can skip or whatever you want to do. You framed this as a ghost story with Catherine narrating from beyond the grave. How does this supernatural framework allow you to explore aspects of the original that might have been impossible otherwise?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I first decided to do this. I just remember, and I don't know how it came to me. I was upstairs in my bedroom one day, and I just suddenly, I don't know why I thought about Wuthering Heights. I suddenly did, and I suddenly thought, oh, I want to tell the story of Catherine as a ghost. So I emailed my agent immediately and said, what do you think? And he came back and said, yes, great, good idea, do it. So then I went away for about a year and did it. And basically, I decided that to start my novel with a scene that is only told third hand in Wuthering Heights, and it's when Heathcliff, very late on in the novel, and it's nearly 20 years after Cathy has died, and her husband has now died, Edgar Linton, and he is going to be buried. And Heathcliff basically bribes the sexton, the grave digger, to during the night when he's digging the grave for Edgar, which is directly next to where in the same grave as where Catherine is buried, and he bribes the sexton to let him take the lid off her coffin and see her. And he's telling Nelly Dean, and she's horrified. She's sort of like, "Did you not fear what you would see?" And he says, no, she could never, she could never horrify me. I mean, I can't remember the exact quote, but, she could never repel me or repulse me. Whatever form her body took, I love her. And I suddenly thought that's a really interesting idea that we see secondhand. And it's suddenly, and very close after that point, Nelly Dean is describing him as looking ghoulish, as looking vampiric. There are quite a few references throughout the novel to him having pointy vampirish teeth, which I don't think I'd ever noticed in earlier readings. But I didn't go with that theme of vampire. I thought I'd leave that one. I've done that one in Dangerous with Lord Byron. But
Excited to read that now.
but I decided I would start it with that grave being dug, but from Cathy's point of view. So the novel opens with Cathy saying, "What wakes me from my dreams?" And she has been dreaming, as it were, in her coffin for the last 18, 20 years, I think it's 18 years, about running on the moors. And I mentioned when she that those words when she's talking to Nelly about having a dream about going up to heaven and being unhappy and being flung back down onto the heath by the angels, and weeping with joy because she was back where she belonged and where she wanted, the only heaven she ever wanted. And I fuse all this into that first chapter. But I have her opening her eyes when Heathcliff takes the lid off her coffin, and she sees these black eyes sparkling because there's a lantern, it's the night time, and she can't remember it. She doesn't know who it is in her sort of ghostly form at first. She thinks she recognizes this person, but all that comes into her mind is my murderer. And I don't know if you remember, but when before she dies, shortly before she dies in the novel, when Heathcliff visits her illicitly when her husband's at church, they both use this word murderer as if they've literally murdered each other out of this obsession and this unquieted love. So basically, she rises from her grave. He doesn't see her ghost, although he would be desperate to. He doesn't see her. He can't. All he sees is a little flicker, like a little worm, like a little glowworm in the night. But she sees her reflection in his eyes, and the reflection she sees isn't herself as a corpse. And in the book, she is perfectly preserved. And there's a reason for that, because in Yorkshire, in that part of Yorkshire where Emily lived, the ground is very peaty and damp, and that soil, it's well known, preserves the bodies of the dead.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I have
Did not know this.
yeah. So again, that's an incredibly Gothic idea that because Heathcliff says no, she was perfectly preserved, and so I've taken that. So she sees that, but then that changes, and she sees a reflection in her eyes of herself when she was the age she was when her father first brought Heathcliff back to Wuthering Heights from the streets of Liverpool, and this. She turns around and sees this reflection of this little girl behind her, and so she is the ghost, and she is herself as a little 5-6-year-old child go running across the moors back to Wuthering Heights, and she ends up back in the house with the ghost looking in and seeing Cathy at the window as a little girl, a candlelit window, rubbing a little spot in the steam with her fingers and looking out
Hmm.
to look for her father coming home. So I wanted that to be a sort of mirror of Emily's beginning, with the ghost of Cathy on the outside looking in. My little girl is on the inside looking out, and her ghost is there on the outside, her future ghost, who she does see. But she's waiting for her father. And so that's how I start it. And I then go into the first scene where, he does bring Heathcliff home, and I describe all of that quite faithfully, but it's all from Cathy's point of view and how she, as a little girl, experienced that, and adding quite a few extra bits in.
Excited. I'm really excited to read this. It sounds so fascinating. Um,
It was a
let's
joy to write.
see.
It was an absolute
I bet.
joy, I have to say, but also it was quite an emotional experience. Again, I don't really understand why. I mean, I've written 6 other novels. I've never felt like this. And I really did feel as if I don't know if I did succeed, but for myself, I felt as if I really got into the soul of Cathy, and I found her whole story, so incredibly sad, but also very dynamic and moving and passionate, and the love of the countryside and the moors, that love and that sense of heaven, all that joy is there as well. It's not just sadness, there is joy.
Yeah, I love that. Several reviewers, I'm just looking at Goodreads, mentioned that your writing feels authentically Victorian, yet more accessible than the original. How did you walk that tightrope between honoring Emily Bronte's language and making it engaging for contemporary readers?
Oh, I don't know. I just I always do feel that it's very, very important, if you're writing a novel set in the Victorian era or any historical era, to really get to grips with the language. Now, this time it was different because I was mirroring Wuthering Heights itself as a book. So
Hmm.
with this situation, I wanted to be as true as I could to Emily's voice. I did quite a similar thing with Dangerous. I really read so many works by Lord Byron, and I read so many of his letters, and I really, it's like method acting. I really wanted to get into his
Right.
voice and his sense of humor actually as well, and his tone, and that he was so honest. It was interesting. With Wuthering Heights, tried to keep myself absolutely focused just on the book, nothing else. And I just try to be true to the style, but obviously there are some aspects of it. For instance, Joseph, the farm manager, as it were, his accent and his dialogue in the book are barely understandable. I don't know how you found it, but even for me being from England,
Yeah.
it's very, very hard to make head or tail of what he's actually saying because it's in such
Yes.
strong old dialect. And I thought, gosh,
Hmm.
when I have scenes with him there, and I had some of the scenes that I was emulating and mirroring, and I took some of the most iconic phrases and I've reused them. And I thought, I don't know, I can't really do that. I've got to make him understandable. So I suppose from that point of view, I do try to honor the tone and the style, but if it is a little bit inaccessible in places, I just try to make it. But I've still got quite Victorian style, quite long sentences, lots of commas,
Right.
sentences running on and flowing, quite poetical because I think Emily's writing is poetical and she was a poet, obviously.
Very.
I've used her poetry in the novel. So I wanted to call it, my working title was No Coward Soul, which is my favorite of Emily's poems. And so what I've got is not that one, but a lot of the parts, I can't find them now, but the book's in 4 parts, and each part, oh, here we are. So part 2, it starts with a page that has a few lines from No Coward Soul. Vain are the thousand creeds that move men's hearts, unutterably vain, worthless as withered weeds. So it's a sort of, a dour mood, but by this point we're getting into quite dark aspects of the novel.
Love
Um,
that.
and I love doing that. And also, normally in a book, when I write a book, and all my 6 other books are dedicated to either my husband or my daughter or dear friends. And this time, I've dedicated it to Emily, and I just wrote, "She burned too bright for this world," which is a line from Wuthering Heights. But I know I could cry now because Emily burned too bright for this world, and we lost
Good.
her much, much too young. But look
Yes.
what she left us with. Amazing, amazing.
Oh, I love that. I love that you incorporated her poetry in there as well. On our tours, we have a guided hike through the moors, and we go to this old shooting hut, and we have a private chef there that makes food for us by campfire, and then we read Emily Brontë poetry, and it's like it's all very very gothic and very romantic.
Sounds
So yeah,
absolutely amazing.
yeah, I love hearing her poetry, especially read on the moors in that setting. It's just
Yes,
it's like a highlight for us, definitely.
wonderful,
And
wonderful.
I appreciate you keeping the Yorkshire dialect readable for at least for us Americans,
Mm.
especially. Is so difficult
I
to
mean,
understand
I've
that.
tried to
So
make it so that he obviously does have a different sort of accent.
yes.
And I don't know, one of the things that worried me is, should I have been more faithful to the original dialect? I probably made his sort of rural country accent more like Herefordshire, where I come from,
Hmm.
than Yorkshire.
Right.
But I do think, and I hope it is that way, definitely more understandable.
Yes, which is appreciated.
He was quite a joy to write, actually, Joseph, because I despise Joseph. I mean, I think we're all supposed to despise him.
Right.
But actually,
Yes.
when you read him and all his obsession with religion, it's
Hmm.
actually, it's quite funny, actually. His mania and his refusal for anybody to sing carols at Christmas because it's the devil's psalmody. And I just think that when you think that Emily was a parson's daughter and that much of her life would have been spent attending church and hearing her father's sermons, that she was just having, a little go at the really extreme religious fanatics that she must have come across.
I always wonder who, like what person in your life are you mirroring this person
I bet
after?
there was
Because
someone that she'd met. I can imagine.
this crotchety old person at church just
Mm.
drives me nuts. I write them into my novel. I know I would have done the same. I would have been petty.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, in the original, we see Catherine largely through Nelly Dean's eyes, a
Yeah.
servant who has her own biases and blind spots. How did giving Catherine her own voice change your understanding of her choices? We might have already discussed this a little bit, but if you want
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
any deeper into that.
Yeah, I suppose we have really, just that, seeing it from a first person point of view, would change things. And also, I've incorporated things that Nelly could never have seen or heard because she wasn't present. So that was a gift. I could have scenes, for instance, that Christmas when Catherine's come back from Thrushcross Grange after being bitten by the bulldog, and she's invited the Linton children to come for Christmas. So Edgar and Isabella come and spend Christmas, and Heathcliff isn't allowed to join them. He's beaten up by Hindley yet again and locked up in the attic. And then we know from Nelly Dean that she catches Cathy climbing. She climbs out of the window and goes to visit Heathcliff in the attic, but we don't know what happened in the attic. So what was really an absolute gift for me was parts like that in the novel, and I thought, okay, I'm doing it from Catherine's point of view, not Nelly's. So I'm there when Cathy is climbing outside on the icy snow parapet and climbing into the little attic window. And, I can create a whole scene where she is with Heathcliff, who is at that point absolutely devastated because, she's stayed at Thrushcross Grange for 5 weeks. When she comes back, she laughs at him for being dirty and having very black, dirty hands because he's been set to labour on the farm like a slave. And that was a gift to have that sort of interaction between them, where there'd only been misunderstanding, and now they could maybe, try to explain to each other what was going on. She could try to apologise. One of the first of many attempts to apologise, but she's selfish. So she loves Heathcliff dearly, but she also wants two worlds. Again, that's that two world thing. Is Cathy wants Heathcliff and she wants the moors, but once she has seen a different life in Thrushcross Grange, and the fine clothes and the fine food and the grandeur and the wonderful cultivated gardens, she wants that too. Cathy wants her cake and she wants to eat it.
Yes. I love that you had the artistic license to just, create those scenes that Nellie wasn't there for.
Yes, I have
That's going
scenes
to
like
be,
Penistone Crag, and that's very important in the novel. And also, I have other scenes in the graveyard. So, for instance, when Cathy's father dies, one thing I thought was really interesting, and I think it reflects back on Emily and Emily's childhood and her own losses, is Catherine's mother is in the novel at the beginning because she is one of the first ones who mentions that she calls she doesn't want her husband to bring Heathcliff into their house, and he does say I know he's as black as the devil, which could be his ethnicity, but could also be the fact that he's absolutely filthy because Nelly Dean has to take him into the kitchen and scrub him down. But I just felt that when Catherine's mother, I mean, she's there and she has this view on Heathcliff, and suddenly, not that very much further into the novel, Cathy's mother dies. And we don't really, that's it. It happens, and then she's out of the story. And we do have more to do with Mr. Heathcliff, Mr. Earnshaw, Cathy's father. And we see his death, which is incredibly moving. But then he's gone and the story moves on. And what I've tried to do is understand and try and, the grief that Hindley would have felt because he was older, 8 years older when his mother died. And then also the grief that both Cathy and Heathcliff would have felt when her father dies. So I have a scene after his burial in the kirkyard when Cathy and Heathcliff, there's quite an important scene in my novel. They're very young at that point. They're about 12 years old, but something happens which sort of strengthens their bond even more in the churchyard. And I've linked it to a spot where her future grave will be. And she's sitting under a tree with her hands on the soil, and she's feeling, and she thinks she sees this ghostly woman on the other side of the wall again. So the ghostliness of it comes back in, because she's actually sitting on the spot where her grave will be, but she doesn't know that.
But
But
we've
also,
already discussed. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we've already discussed this a little bit, but if there's anything else that you want to say, that one reviewer mentioned that you handled Heathcliff's treatment due to his skin color very sensitively. How did you approach depicting the racial dimensions of his character while staying true to the period?
Well, I think that's something again that I've sort of with me and my big mouth gone on already. I've tried to mention all of the times when Emily mentions his ethnicity. Um, I go further though. In my novel, I know we never know where he goes in those 3 years when he leaves in Wuthering Heights, and that's actually a wonderful part of the mystery of him, because he's kind of an elemental character. I don't think necessarily that we need to know where he went, what he did, um, only that he comes back, and only that he's filled with revenge and an obsession to get revenge. But I actually do deal with a possible origin story for him in my novel. I
Okay.
do it quite briefly. When he comes back, the scene when he's visiting Thrushcross Grange. He's already been back a few months, and Nelly Dean is down in the kitchen when Cathy goes down into the kitchen, and Cathy is pregnant, and she sees Nelly looking out of the window, and Nelly is muttering to herself because she's seen Heathcliff seducing Isabella out in the garden. And so Cathy sees this happening, and then Heathcliff walks into the kitchen on his own. Nelly Dean goes out, and Cathy and Heathcliff are talking about Isabella, and she's saying, well, do you want to marry her? Because you better ask my husband for her hand if that's the case. And he's saying, I'd rather slash my throat than marry her. But if you won't come away with me, then I will, just to spite you and spite him. And he means it. I don't think she thinks he means it. I take the opportunity of that point in the novel when Nelly Dean has left the room for Heathcliff, then, at that point when he says, I would rather slash my throat, to explain to Cathy where he's been and what has happened and what he's learned about his past. And I don't want to say what it is.
Don't give
Um,
it away.
but it's just, I think one could come up with all sorts of different possibilities.
Right.
But let's just say Liverpool was very much, as many, many wealthy cities in the United Kingdom are, a city built on the slave trade.
Mhm.
That is how many people found their wealth. It's a shipping port, and slaves were brought in and sold. And a lot of the slavers had very grand houses. If you go to Bristol, which was another slaving city in the UK, you will see the most beautiful Georgian houses, very Bridgerton, very Jane
Yeah.
Austen style. And they were built on the slave trade wealth. So I have used this past. I won't say how,
I'm
but
excited. I'm excited to read it. You're
yeah.
just gonna have to read it and find out.
And again, it's something else which
Um,
even fosters yet more resentment within him because of the mistreatment of other people that he learns about.
yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Mm. But it's also linked. Oh, I don't know if I should say too much.
Yeah,
I
don't give
feel
too much
like,
away.
no, I better not give too much away. But I feel the bond. Oh, I probably give too much away. I feel the bond between Heathcliff and Cathy goes very deep. I won't say any more than that.
All right. Have to read and find out.
Mm.
All right. So next question. You clearly have a deep knowledge of the period. Have you visited the Brontë Parsonage? I think we've already talked about that. Or the Yorkshire moors while
Mm,
writing this? And how
yes,
did place inform your retelling?
very much so. Obviously, the parsonage, that's not so much in my novel because the two big houses in the novel are, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, which are both grand houses. Um, but I have visited lots and lots of old grand historical houses in the United Kingdom and of that period. And with Wuthering Heights being built in the 1500s, you know, properties of that time are very Gothic. And what I
Mm.
absolutely loved about that, and I've used this in the descriptions, but also themes of the novel, is the fact that there's the plaque above the door with the griffins and the cupids. And so that comes into the novel quite a lot. And because it's like the heaven and hell and the mythological aspects of it. And I loved all the fact that these buildings have their latticed windows, narrow lattice windows, dark stone, which would be weathered by the years, and the fir trees growing around Wuthering Heights, tapping against the windows. All of this was just an absolute boon to me, who loves writing Gothic descriptions. And also, I loved writing about Thrushcross Grange. It completely, a later house, a more Georgian sort of grand square, like a doll's house almost. And I loved the idea of Cathy looking down over the moors and seeing the lights shining in this fine house down below when they want to go and look in through the windows and see what's going on, which is the beginning of the end of the Heathcliff, really, with her sort of falling in love, not with Edgar Linton, but with his life and his wealth. And the moors themselves, I absolutely love, the wildness, the expanse of it, Penistone Crag, and the Bronte Falls, the waterfalls, which you will have visited, won't you? I'm sure.
Mm.
Um, I loved visiting there. I sat there and it was very special for me because I'd written a scene in the novel previously to visiting where I have Heathcliff and Cathy as children. Um, Walking across the moors, stopping at this beck and this stream and waterfalls, and she's digging her hands into the silt of the bottom of the stream of the beck. She pulls out a stone that's got a hole in it, which we call a witch's stone, a hag stone. And there's a little bit of witchcraft, not specifically, but there's a slight witchiness in my novel about Cathy. And this stone becomes important as a device later on in the novel, by which she can see things. And I'll say no more than that looking through the stone. And Heathcliff, on this day when they're at the beck, finds a crow that's fallen out of its nest, and they take the crow back with them to Wuthering Heights. And the whole thing, I don't know if you have this in the States, but we have this old superstition and folklore in the UK that if you bring a bird into a house, it's bad luck. If you bring a wild bird into a house, that it portends a death. So I have them bringing this bird in before her father's death, and it's also, but the crow itself, the image of the crow keeps recurring through the book, and it first occurs actually when Cathy is waking up in her grave and being raised from her grave, as it were, by Heathcliff digging, taking the lid off and looking at her. The crow in my book first appears then. It flies out of the tree, and as it's cawing and it's going, caw, 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 she thinks it sounds like a baby crying, and she's thinking, a baby? Was there a baby? Because she still can't remember at that point that she died in childbirth. And I take that uncertainty and lack of memory and use it so that then, as she's watching her life unfold through the eyes of beginning a 5 or 6 year old child and then onwards, she's learning, as it were, at first hand as well about her life. So the ghost is learning, but at the center of the novel, when she dies, she's then aware of everything that's gone before, and she then follows the life of her daughter and sees how Heathcliff is determined to ruin her daughter's life and his son's life and Hareton, the son of Hindley's life. So then her ghost is back at Wuthering Heights, observing all of this, having some influence on what is happening in her ghostly form that I can't describe how, but she does do things that do influence the action. And again, I follow
Interesting.
very closely what actually does happen in the book, but I've added this ghost weaving in and out of it.
I
Um,
love it.
a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. It's definitely
Yes.
like a cracked mirror. It's definitely like looking at the whole thing through a mirror that's wavering and cracked.
Hmm. You must have had to have a spreadsheet or something of, here's what's going on in Wuthering Heights and
No,
here's what I'm writing.
I think
No, just
I'm
all from memory.
obsessive. I just no.
I would have had a hard time
Well,
keeping it all straight.
all I had to do was jot down dates. I did have to jot down dates and ages.
Yeah,
Because sometimes I think, oh gosh, well, how old would they be at this time, and how old will,
right.
and
Just like a timeline.
what's terribly confusing, of course, is Cathy's daughter being called Cathy,
Right,
and
right. Every time I
Heathcliff's
read
son
Wuthering
being
Heights, I'm
called
like, why?
Linton. I know,
I know, I'm like, why?
I know, so
Why
confusing.
did you do that to us? So
So I had to find
confusing.
a way to clarify that, because of course when I have Cathy the ghost and the daughter in the same
Right.
scenes, although the daughter isn't aware of
Yes.
her being there, um, I would have her call it, because again it's first person, so I got around that by her calling her my daughter,
Right. That's good. Yeah. Make it
and
less confusing.
then hopefully people won't be confused as to which Cathy is which.
Right. Because that does get complicated.
It does, yes, it
All
does
right. All
definitely.
right. Uh, Emily Brontë wrote Wuthering Heights in relative isolation in Haworth, never marrying, dying young. Do you see any of Emily herself in Catherine? How did your understanding
Um,
of the author influence your approach to the character?
I think Catherine is incredibly brave. I think she is reckless, and I think Emily probably was. I think Emily, loved nothing more than to go striding across the moors, and with her dog, with Keeper, and she loved dogs. I have very much have dogs in my novel. They're quite important to it. Um, so I think all that sort of thing, yes, I'm sure that Emily put a lot of herself into Cathy, but probably not entirely, because I think through Nelly Dean's eyes, Cathy can be quite unlikable. But I I feel that, in the same way that Heathcliff is brought into a family, raised like a sibling, and then suddenly one of the parents, Mr. Earnshaw, dies, and Heathcliff is reduced to being no more than a slave.
Mm.
If you think about Nelly Dean, she was brought into that family as a baby. Her mother breastfed Hindley. She was a wet nurse. And then Nelly gets very close to Hindley, who's like a brother to her as toddlers, as little children. And she says herself, she keeps going back all the time. She keeps returning, even when her mother is no longer employed as a nurse for Hindley. Little Nelly, as a child, keeps running back. And to stay near Hindley, who she obviously, although this is never expressed as such, but must love and adore as a brother in the early years, eventually, I mean, she gets taught with him. She shares his lessons with the curate. She learns to read and write, and she's having an education with him. And suddenly, Hindley's mother decides this is not good. Now, I'm guessing it's probably when they're getting to teenage years. And Mrs. Earnshaw decides if Nelly wants to stay, then she's going to be a servant. And from that point on, the little girl who's been educated with Hindley, living like his sister, playing with him, running wild, is suddenly reduced to a servant in the house, and is a servant thereafter, and is treated quite callously by Hindley. At one point, he even, when he's in his desperate grief and anger and rage and drunken, flings her down on the kitchen table and holds a knife to her mouth, to her throat, and tries to put it in her mouth. But I think in some ways she is also a mirror of Heathcliff, because in a way what happened to him happened to her as well. And I feel that she sees Cathy, who is spoilt, who is pretty much gets away with doing whatever she wants to do, really. And even when she's told off by her father or told that she's getting to be, a little madam, and but she gets round it by kissing her father's hands and singing to him, and she's charming, but she gets away with it. But she is quite well, quite a selfish character, and I think Nelly Dean probably resents that. I felt that there would be a little bit of resentment. And perhaps that is why, when Cathy has been very unkind and rude to Nelly on the afternoon when Linton proposes to Cathy, and then later that day when Cathy is in the kitchen with Nelly saying, "Should I do it? Should I marry him?" Nelly knows that Heathcliff is in the shadows, listening to every word. Oh, why doesn't she say? But she doesn't. She lets Cathy carry on. And I feel that because Cathy had been very unkind to her that afternoon, she'd pinched her arm so hard, it had a big red mark. She'd been very rude to her. And I don't think Nelly Dean for one moment intended what happened to happen for Heathcliff to go off for 3 years. But I think she did intend him to see Cathy in a bad light. I think there are quite a few instances in the actual original novel where Nelly does things that perhaps if she acted differently or said something differently, events would not have unrolled in the way they do. The tragedy may not have occurred. But because Nelly is telling the story, I think Emily is so clever. She plants these seeds, but she does it in a way that, yes, because Nelly is telling her story, she's not going to condemn herself or damn herself, but sometimes we can see the double meanings.
Yes. That's interesting. I've never really thought too much about that, but it
It's
makes a lot
just,
of sense.
I think every time I read this novel, I think I said earlier, but every time and at different ages, I do find something new in it. And I do think that the depth of characterization, which is so finely done that, in initial readings, you may not even notice these things. You suddenly think, well, why did they do that? Why did that happen? And I just think Emily is a genius.
Makes me wonder about Emily's relationship with, the help in her household, I
Yes. Yeah, well, Tabby. Is it Tabby, the
think
maid?
so.
Um,
You'll know better than I do.
yeah, yes. I think there probably are touches of her there, definitely.
Yeah,
Mm. With the knitting and and,
right.
and, and sewing. And I noticed, I think Anne Brontë as well, I think in The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall, she's often mentioning, I remember my last reading of that, which I'd never noticed before, is that Anne mentions a lot about people knitting and sewing, which of course would have been a household activity that would have gone on all the time.
Yeah, for everyone,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
women.
Mm. And I think so things like that I think are really interesting, how they take those small details and infuse them into the story.
Yeah. I just, the talk that I was telling you about earlier, you would probably, I don't know, maybe you already know her. I'm trying to remember I'll have to look up her name, but she wrote a book. It's called, oh goodness, I think it was Charlotte Bronte's Life Through Clothes.
Oh,
I'm trying to
okay.
remember the name of
Right.
um, I'll find
That's
the name
interesting.
of the author. I
Because
was messaging.
Charlotte's dress, her wedding dress in the parsonage, I mean, she was so tiny. It's
Yes, so
unbelievable.
tiny.
So
Tiniest
tiny.
waists I've ever seen.
Amazing,
uh,
amazing. Gosh.
Trying to find her name for you. Eleanor Houghton.
Right. Well, that sounds very interesting. I'll have to look that
Yeah.
up.
Anyways, something you might be interested in.
Yeah,
I listened to a
definitely.
talk by her at the parsonage put it on. It was really
Oh, I
interesting.
missed that one. They put some great talks on, don't they? Actually, I'm
They
doing a talk
do. They do.
in
Oh, are
April.
you?
Yes, I think I can't remember quite which date it is in April, but it's the Bronte
Okay.
Society will put out the info about that.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'll be there. I'll be there watching.
Great.
Okay, just a few more questions. Thanks so much for giving me so much of your time. It's been really fascinating. Wuthering Heights is one of the foundational Gothic novels, and you've written several Victorian Gothic works. What is it? And you have a Gothic podcast as well. What is it about the Gothic that keeps drawing you back? And how does Catherine fit into that tradition?
My mother's horrified, I think. I remember I remember going to a book club somebody invited me to in my hometown, and I went along and my mother came with me, and we were they were discussing one of my novels, and at the end of it my mother just said, well, if I were you, I wouldn't buy any of my daughter's books because they're all rather ghoulish, they're I can't read them. I've never read one of them in my life. So I think if I
Oh my
read Love
goodness.
Romances, my mother would love it. Um, I don't know. I think, being serious about this now, um, when I was very young, I was very close to my two grandmothers, who both lived in the same small town. Both of my grandmothers died, one when I was 5, one when I was 6. Both of my grandfathers died about the same time. So by the time I was 7, I had lost all 4 grandparents, and I had been incredibly close to my grandmothers. And even now, I still remember, so much that I used to do with them. And one of the things I used to do with them was watch old black and white films on the television. And a lot of those were like that early film I saw, Wuthering Heights, although I did watch that with my mum. Um, but lots of old Bette Davis films, which can be pretty dark, and all these just old, quite dark films. And then as I got a little bit older, um, my brother and I used to, when my mum had gone to bed, creep out of our beds. And on Friday nights in the UK, they used to have, when it was all terrestrial television and we didn't have the internet, because, gosh, I lived a long time before the internet. And my brother and I used to creep out of bed and go into the front room, put the television on, and watch these really old horror films that they used to screen about 10:30 at night. So we would watch things like the old black and white film of The Haunting, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, and
Mm.
all the old Hammer horror films. And I just loved it. I just loved it. And I've always loved reading things like Edgar Allan Poe. Um, I used to buy books, the Pan Book of Horror Stories or the Pan Book of Ghost Stories. And I don't know why, but I'm very drawn to that sort of writing. And yet, oddly enough, I don't think I'm a very dark sort of person in my day-to-day life. Um,
You don't seem dark, but
It's strange. I mean, I'm not your traditional sort of goth by any means, but I have this. I don't know why. I do think a lot of it's to do with grief in my childhood and loss.
hmm.
My
Yes.
father also disappeared off the scene at the same time as my grandparents died. So
Wow.
there was a lot of upheaval. There was a lot of sorrow, which I probably wasn't aware of with my mother. I hope she'll never listen to this, but and she won't. But her grief, at being
Hmm.
on her own with 3 very young children, and the difficulties of that. I think things like that leave their mark, and I don't think I've become someone who's resentful and bitter about that, but I think it's made me very much appreciative and understanding when you read dark literature in the way things like Edgar Allan Poe, which I used to read when I was 11 or 12, I could really sense his devastation and grief.
You
And
understood that
yeah,
more than other young children, I'm sure.
and so and artistically, I love descriptive writing, and I love that Gothic vibe, and I love old buildings. I love history, and of course, my love of the Victorian era as well. I mean, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I like Wilkie
Hmm.
Collins. I like all the darkness. I like Dracula. So for some reason that appeals to me, and I don't know
Yeah.
why.
No, that's just fine. That's really interesting. I did have another question, a little bit off topic, but is there a house that you have been to that for you represents Wuthering Heights?
Not well, do you know what? I was going to say Laycock Abbey. I'm not sure. There's a place called Laycock Abbey in the
Hmm.
south of England. Um,
I've been.
have you? The home
Hmm.
of photography, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
fascinating. But so I think old abbeys and things like that, because I always think of sort of slightly castellated walls, and I love that description in Wuthering
Hmm.
Heights of the the whole the sort of castellated thing and the cupids. And is it Haddon Hall that's got, I don't think it's Haddon Hall, there's another hall in Yorkshire, but I haven't visited it, and I've seen photographs, and I'll send them to you, which will be I don't think it is Haddon Hall at all. No, it's not. There's another one anyway. I will send it to you and the images, and you will see exactly
Yeah.
the inspiration of that. And I do want to visit that place. And it has got griffins and cupids, much, much bigger than I think they're described in Wuthering Heights, but on these sort of little turrets either side of the gate above the door, these wonderful old griffins, which are terribly Gothic and quite scary. It's sort of very mythological.
Love it. Okay, you'll have to send that to me when you find out what that
Mm.
is. I do love Haddon Hall, though. We do go there on our tour,
Oh,
and it's
wonderful.
amazing.
I wish I could come on your tour.
I know, I know. If we're ever in the same location while I'm on my tour, we'll definitely have
Mm,
to meet up, and I'm sure my guests
definitely.
would love, 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 love to meet you. Definitely putting your book, probably too late on this tour, but next year's tour, definitely putting your
Wonderful.
book on our reading list.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I think I just have a couple more. Okay, what do you hope readers take away from Catherine that they might not get from the original? Or what do you hope it inspires them to discover in Bronte's novel?
Well, if they haven't read Wuthering Heights, I would hope it would then lead them on to read it, because I do think it's one of the greatest books in English
Do you
literature.
think that you can read Catherine before reading Wuthering Heights? Will it
I
ruin the
do.
experience of
I
either
do.
one? Okay.
There was actually a review in the Sunday Times newspaper this weekend which said that people that hadn't read Wuthering Heights might struggle, but I do disagree with that, because quite a few people I know have read my novel in proof form, and they haven't read Wuthering Heights, my husband included, who hadn't ever read it. And I did say to him the other day, have you had trouble understanding? And he said, no, no, not at all. I think I've made it more linear, and
Mhm.
but what I have been very, very careful to do is to take all the major beats, all the major scenes in Wuthering Heights, I have remained totally faithful to, but just describe them from another point of view and added other elements, um, scenes off, as it were. Um, I don't think it's necessary, but I do feel that people that have read Wuthering Heights and who really love it, I hope they won't hate me for being audacious enough to actually have done this, because it is audacious, and I'm very well aware of that. And it was something which almost made me not write the book, because I thought, if I do this, I'm going to be hated. Um, I hope I'm not. And I really, really have tried my very, very best, to write a book which I hope complements and would not be a disgrace to Emily Brontë. I really hope. The reviews so far have been lovely. We'll see what happens in the future. Um, but no, I don't think one needs to. I just hope that people will go away and think a little bit more about the complexities of the novel, and why I've taken such a deep dive into the characterization, and why I've tried to understand motives and actions.
Love that. All right. Thank you, Essie. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
Just thank you. This has been absolutely lovely. And you've
Yeah.
been a wonderful host. Thank you so much. It's
Oh,
just been a
thank you.
joy.
Thank you. Oh, I love all of your deep knowledge. It's so fun to talk with someone who is really passionate about that as
Mm,
well. So it's been really great to meet you. Thank you so
thank
much for taking
you.
the time to be with us. And the book comes out in April, and I will put in the date as soon as I get that date from you,
Thank
and
you so
I'll
much.
pop
Thank
that in there.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Essie.
Thank you,
And
Vanessa.
let me know, if I'll let you know our schedule if our paths are ever crossing. I'd love to meet up with you in real
Please
life.
do. Please do. I'm going to
Okay.
Haworth next week, actually, but that's for the UK publication.
Oh,
We're
yes.
in the Haworth Church.
Oh,
So
amazing. Oh
very
my
much looking
gosh.
for that. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could pop over and be there for that. That'd be amazing.
It's a little bit horrible, not horrible, a little bit scary for me to think of Emily being in her tomb underneath us.
Right? But
But
that's
she
like,
might, she
that's
might rise up, she
amazing.
might rise up from her grave to haunt me. She might be so angry. It suddenly occurred to me the other day. Oh my goodness. Anyway,
See if you can get someone to lift the coffin lid for you.
let's
Well,
not go,
best of
let's not
luck.
go there.
I'm not as brave as Heathcliff.
No,
Well, best of luck with publication date, and are you doing like a book tour or
there's quite a lot
anything?
going
Yeah.
on actually. Yes, yes. I'm
Yeah. It's
going
exciting.
all over the place. But
It's
yeah.
exciting. Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to go pick up some of your other books. Where do you think would be a good place to start with your other books?
Well, I think because it's another ghost story, I'd go for Lady Grey, The Last Days of Lady Grey.
Okay.
It's completely different, but I think also, as you said, your daughter was interested in film and
Mm-hmm.
photography. Um, I think you might enjoy that one, and I do.
Yeah,
I
that
love
one
that.
that one piqued my interest for sure. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
great. All
Well,
right,
thank
thank
you.
you, Essie. Keep in touch, okay?
Definitely,
And have a
definitely. It's
great
been
night. Sorry about it being so late there.
no, no, it's not at all. It's not at all. Anyway,
All
thank you.
right. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on this special episode of the Brit Lit Book Club with incredible author Essie Fox. Her book, Catherine, will be published February 12th in the UK and April 14th in the US, where you can find it at Barnes & Noble bookstores across the country. We'll see you next time on the Brit Lit Book Club podcast. Until then, keep reading and stay curious.